Right, we on?
We are, yeah, we're going.
You let it up, yeah.
Push a door to in case.
Put wood
in soil.
It works better with three of us.
What are you saying? It's certainly better looking.
Right, we're ready.
I'm going to say I'll leave that bit in.
Leave that bit in.
Yeah.
4 presents, 3 people.
I know. What
share
we're
and
do.
share alike.
What we're going to do. Welcome to the Christmas special, if you like, of 4020 Live. What a year it's been for us, boys. Started off in one place, ended up in another. An eventful journey along the way. What a year in Rugby League as well. Wins at Wembley for the Catalans Dragons, their first major trophy in the Super League era. Wigan win again at the grand final. Sent Shaun Wane out of Rugby League in style. Who would have thought we'd have been saying that at the beginning of the season? And what about Saints? Almost embarrassed to pick up the League Leaders' Shield. Should they have celebrated it a little bit more? Joy off on the field in the international stages. England beat New Zealand and also beat Australia at youth level as well. We're going to be looking back at the year, looking back at our highlights of it. We want to say thank you to each and every one of you that's followed us on our journey. The podcast numbers have been fantastic. The views, interaction, everything. Make it probably the most talked about rugby league show anywhere on the internet, where literally millions of you listen every week to our wonderful show. No Scully today. He's been banished.
Too much plum duff.
He's on the sauce, I heard.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And in true Christmas spirit, I am doing this show with a slight hangover. So,
excellent.
Which is quite worrying, because someone might be watching this about 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. They're wondering, when does this man go to the pub?
Well, in fairness to
All
Scully,
the time.
he did say
No, that is not
Anytime.
Yeah,
that's
no
libel.
No libel. No libel.
Don't go down the road of libel.
No. In fairness to Scully, he did send out his happy Christmas message 2 days ago. So,
did he?
Yeah, that's it now.
On
He
sex. He sent it on. We've been offered some Toronto. People say, what did the Toronto Wolfpack bring to Rugby League? Well, I'll tell you what they bring. They bring red and white M&Ms that say Toronto Wolfpack on them. Thanks to Sandy for a wonderful
They do look like Wigan
gift.
ones.
Well, we can live with that, can't we? We can live with that.
We can eat with that, for sure.
We can. Where do you want to start then? What was the big story then? Phil?
I think it probably was the Dragons winning the Challenge Cup final. I'm not sure you can go much further than that. It's probably not the time of year to talk about issues in the sport. It's better to look forward, perhaps, than look back. But it has been a season that's been riddled with dissent amongst various groups and dispute and aggravation that perhaps should have been kept a little bit more under wraps, but has tainted the sport in this country. And I think we've said on this programme, for maybe 2 years, that the game's at a crossroads. It's rapidly approaching the time when it needs to make a decision as to which turning it's going down.
Have the RFL underestimated Robert Elston, do you think? Going away from the Dragons momentarily, because there is a huge split now in the game.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me that the Super League teams are getting more and more power with each and every passing day.
And I'm not sure it's an amicable split either. I think that's something that's going to have to be worked out over the early part of the new year. I think we've seen a statement today that the Championship and League One clubs are not following exactly the same rules that Super League are going to be following. I think once you start going down that road, division beckons. So I think if we put all of that to one side because of the time of year and we're all joyous and can't wait for Santa to arrive, the Dragons winning at Wembley was a massive shot in the arm for the sport. It got us headlines that we perhaps wouldn't have got.
Yeah.
It got us into places like Barcelona for next year. It improved the image of French Rugby League, which is massive over there.
Yeah.
Now, I think we underestimate how important it is that L'Équipe carried that as a story. That's really big. And the great thing is that I think along the way they made so many friends. So much was made of the crowd at Wembley, but there was a genuine goodwill, even from Warrington fans, when they realised the implications of Catalan winning the cup. So for me, that highlight is a season's best.
Did it bring back, Rich, Catalan winning at Wembley? Did it back the old underdog
the magic
story?
of the cup?
Yeah, because I remember when I first started going to Wembley, and there was a bus crew who used to go every year. Didn't matter who would play, we'd be there. The Bulls were in it a few times. They lost quite a few times as well, but still had a great weekend out. And Probably the one big one is, remember watching the Eagles win, and it felt a little bit like that this time. I mean, obviously, I think we had a little investment on the Dragons. We had a sporting reason, a financial reason for them to win, which they did, and we thank them, really. Thanks, Steve, for that.
More important than anything.
Yeah, but yeah, well done. But it just seemed to me that everyone that was there that wasn't a Warrington fan wanted the Dragons to win. We had that underdog story again.
We wanted a story, and that was the story, wasn't it? If Warrington had won the Cup, they'd won it plenty of times in the past, recently, so there's no story there. Well done Warrington, and it's a shame for them they lost in 2 finals in the end, but one achievement from Catalans, the fact that at the start of the season they were awful, the fact at the end of last season they could have been relegated, but somehow bringing in Steve McNamara, who, let's face it, we on this programme questioned that decision and we were wrong.
We spoke to him at the start of the year, and I think we were all swayed by his enthusiasm, weren't we?
Positive.
And then
and his realism as well, because I think he knew that it was going to be a stuttering start to the season.
Yeah.
Because of the World Cup, and he was absolutely right.
Do you reckon he was within a game of saving his job?
I think now, with hindsight, probably not.
Right.
I think they knew, and Bernard Gouache knew, who would have made that decision.
Yeah.
That Steve had said, we're not going to be setting off at a terrific pace. We're going to have to build into the season. We haven't had enough pre-season. We're going to have to get fitter and stronger and better as we go along. But Kenny Edwards helped. Obviously, Josh Drinkwater helped. Thomas Boss coming back helped, because I do think that, again, that language barrier gets broken if you've got dual speakers on your training group. I think they knew that there was a chance that they would come good later on.
Yeah.
I think we read too much, we being the Rugby League public, read too much into their faltering start. But the Eights does that, doesn't it? There were plenty of clubs that were worried.
But as good as they were at Wembley, how good were they against Saints? Absolutely destroyed them in that semi-final.
I couldn't believe it.
That first half is probably the performance of the season.
I was actually in France at the time, the south of France, and I was with a St Helens fan who I wasn't following the game initially. I just saw the look on his face when I went to the bar. He was watching it on his iPad, and it was like, "What's the score?" Oh, 20-odd-0. All right, okay. To Catalans, and he was like, he couldn't believe it. I don't think any of us saw. Look, we fancied that they'd push Saints close. They were playing well at that time, but to do that to St Helens, did that ultimately, was that the performance that derailed St Helens' season?
Yes, I think so. I don't think they ever recovered from that. I think there were some odd games where they played well after that, but I think everybody looked round and said, we've just seen how St Helens can be beaten.
Yeah.
So if we're playing them from now to the end of the season, we shouldn't be fearful of what they can do.
Yeah.
We might not copy what Catalan can do, because we haven't got 8 big forwards the same as they have, but we found a way of slowing them down and knocking them off their stride, keeping the ball away from their strike players, and I think that became the modus operandi for teams as they played them later on in the season when it really mattered.
I got asked about St Helens and what went wrong for them. Do you think Justin Albrook-Rich learnt a lot this year about himself and about maybe the competition? It is his first full year in it. Did Saints run out of steam? Did he play the wrong team? Or did he play his best team too much?
Well, it's always difficult, isn't it? Because if they'd gone on and won the title, we'd have all said, oh, you can't change a winning team, can you? That's the old mantra. But I saw them in the first week, I think it was, against Castleford, wasn't it? And we all remember how great Castleford were in 2017. Yeah, that's the right year. And they blew them off the park. Ben Barber looked great, and this and that and the other. Maybe it's more Ben Barber and his influence. Maybe it takes away from the whole team at St Helens if I say this, but when he started to wane, and I saw that in that game against Wakefield, where Wakefield beat them at Langtree Park, he came off, was substituting in that game, and he seemed to just lose something after that point. And he was obviously the man of steel, the most important, the most impressive player in the league this season, but as soon as he wasn't quite that player.
Did the uncertainty over his future, do you think that had a big part to play in that?
Was it uncertain, though? Was it uncertain? Because everyone pretty much knew, didn't they?
Well, with hindsight, then, instead of saying, oh, he's not going, you should say it's maybe a little bit more.
I think negotiations had already started for his return.
Yeah.
And who he was going to be replaced by long before it was announced. And I think that degree of uncertainty it might not affect the players doing their job, but the club then, there's I don't know, it shouldn't affect the mood, but people want to know.
I remember being there. I forget who the game was against now, and he was getting roundly booed.
Yeah.
Barber. He then made an 80-yard break and they scored a great try. And everyone loves him again. And at the end of that game, he went and sat in the stand. Immediately after the game, went and sat in the stand on his own, and he looked as though the world was against him. And did almost Saints' refusal to say, yeah, he's going. We know he's going. Look, we know what we can do. He's been great. Let's enjoy him while he's here. Did they almost undermine themselves a little bit? Because every week people are talking about Ben Barber, and I just thought it detracted from them.
I think they probably wanted to know that they'd signed his replacement, so and maybe even that helped their negotiating position a little bit. Because if the world had known that they were on the lookout for a fullback, if you had a fullback that they wanted, his price suddenly goes up. But I just think they ran out of steam at the end of the season because, and rightly so, at the beginning of the year we were saying Justin Holbrook's an absolute breath of fresh air, gentleman to the end. I don't think I ever heard him do anything other than praise the opposition when Saints lost. So
even at the end of the year,
when he was clearly hurt.
Yeah, I thought his last press conference was superb. I thought that was a mark of the man, wasn't it? Yeah.
But I think he learnt the hard way what this competition is. That in the NRL you've got 24 weeks and the standard is the same every week, and you have to get your best players out. And if you lose a couple of players, the ones coming in are of a similar standard. Here, halfway through the season, it is endurance. It's 30 odd games plus your cup games, and you have to rotate your players, and you have to bring some juniors in every now and again and give them a taste of it because you might need them at the end of the season. And I think even he may admit that going with something like 23 players for an entire year probably wasn't quite enough.
One of the great bits of news at the end of the season, Richard, is Alex Walmsley is going to be back. It looks like next season. I mean, what a loss he was, injured at Warrington early in the piece, and I know we saw Luke Thompson be probably the standout forward for me in Super League, but they lost the standout forward as well. I think we sometimes overlook that.
Well, I think we should say how well Saints did without him, didn't they? They almost didn't skip a beat without him in the side, and it will be interesting to see how they go next year with him. And they were so close. That semi-final against Warrington was one of the games of the season. Sat there watching, reporting on it on the sidelines. It was a superb game to watch in terms of drama. And you think St Helens, I think they're the favourites with the bookmakers, aren't they, again, for the 2019 season. They'll go. Alex Walmsley will now have, I don't want to say a second lease of life or whatever, but he'll know how close he was, perhaps,
to losing his career. Yeah.
And
it's like a new signing.
Yeah, it is. Well, what do you play? 3 games, 2.5 games, whatever it was.
And they've got Joseph Paolo as well up front. They're going to be big, and some of the kids that they've got coming through will be deserving of a chance. So
another year of experience with Danny Richardson.
Yeah, it won't do him any harm.
Yeah. Do we need to praise Saints for bringing Ben Barber into our game? Because there was a lot made of it. Oh, he's only coming here to do his drug ban, blah, blah, blah. I think we've got to accept that some of these big names are coming here to mend their careers, but I think we enjoy him while he's here, and some of the stuff he did, great, and he does get people talking about the sport, and that's what we want, isn't it?
I think there's a parallel with Jackson Hastings at Salford, and the fact that his social media over the close season so far has been brilliant. Fantastic advert for the game. He's doing some wonderful stuff in the community. I don't think he's made any secret of the fact that he's only signed a 1-year deal because ultimately he sees his future back in the NRL. So no, we need everybody that can give us profile, presence, entertainment more than anything. I think the most exciting thing about knowing you were watching Ben Barber playing was you were going to see top class rugby league. When he was on, he was as good as anything that we've seen in the recent era in terms of imports coming over. There's been a little bit of a turnaround as well now that we're going to see some more of that, I think, in 2019, that a lot of clubs are signing players of Ben Barber's capability, which is what this competition needs.
It is, exactly right. I think undoubtedly, we spoke about the Dragons as being one of the big stories on the field. I think one of the biggest stories off the field was the departure of Shaun Wane at Wigan. We got a whisper around about the Magic weekend that he was going to be going. And I think it's fair to say that everything we were told, barring him go to the Dragons, of course, that was the one bit that probably we did get wrong, but we knew he was going to be going. We knew that Shaun Edwards would be coming in, not next season, but the season after. Shaun Wane divides opinion. Whoever you support, however you watch Rugby League, I think he divides opinion. I tell you what, him going, a lot of people are saying how much they're going to miss him, and that's not just Wigan fans.
I think the interesting thing is we're sitting here at an end of the season, and the 2 coaches that you'd have thought would have been rock solid appointments for next year are not there. So not only is Shaun Wane not there, but who would have thought that Brian McDermott would be relieved of his job halfway through the year? I think Shaun Wane's a really interesting figure. I think obviously he's Mr. Wigan, so the hardcore of Wigan fans absolutely get what he is and what he's about and love him. think there's a lot of respect from other fans. I think fans of other clubs looked at and went, well, if he was our coach, we wouldn't mind that. We admire the way that he goes about his business. There's an honesty about everything. The only thing that would perhaps be in the con column is the fact that although they've won the competition, their crowd has dropped by 2,000.
Yeah.
And the issue, if you are an owner of a club, is why are people not watching us when we're successful?
Yeah.
And that might come back down to this style of play argument. I actually think Wigan played some really attractive rugby last year. But it's almost like the Shaun Wane era has been saddled with, we'll wrestle the life out of you and win. And that's not enough.
Yeah, they're better than that, though.
They have been better than that.
Yeah,
they have been better than that. And it'd be very interesting to see how Adrian Lamb takes that on in an interim year, because he's already vowed that they're going to be more entertaining. But is that the Featherstone problem, that you get a coach in who will make you entertaining, but then you don't achieve the play names that you want to because you don't win competitions? You look pretty, but...
Not only are they losing the coach, Rich, they're losing the likes of Bateman, they're losing Sam Tompkins, leaving the club. Ryan Sutton's moving on. Sean O'Loughlin is another year older, that body another year more battle-weary, shall I say.
Adrian Lamb is the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer of Super League. We'll go with that early. Before the season. So we'll use that one now, and then if people steal it off us, we'll have a go at them. They have lost a lot of very talented players, which is why, my predictions, which will probably be horribly wrong, I've put Wigan out of the top 5. But what we do know about Wigan, because Shaun Wane always talked about it, and Shaun Wane, a very passionate man about the club and everything, and 30 years at Wigan, apart from the time he wasn't there, which everyone forgets. Especially when they're writing up the story. He loved bringing through Wigan youngsters, and again they won the grand final this year for the 27th year in a row, whatever it is now.
What do we make of why he left? Have we got any nearer? Do you think we got?
We're never going to know unless he tells us.
We got queried by the club itself when we said, "Look, he's left. We feel he's been forced out," type thing, but. I remember speaking to him ahead of the semi-finals, and I actually said to him off the camera, I just said, I can't believe you're going, and he said, neither can I. He clearly didn't want to be going. I still can't quite get my head around that.
I think he'll be back in Rugby League sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
I know he's got this job with the Scottish Rugby Union as a consultant or whatever, and he's got his own business interests, but there will come a point. There'll come a point next season where a big club is struggling, and they get rid of their coach, and they will need a coach, and he'll be top of the list.
He will.
And
he's a winner, isn't he? Whether you like him or not,
absolutely.
Phil, he gets the job done.
I think what's interesting as well is that it wasn't just he that's gone from the backroom staff. Mark Bitcon's gone, who was his right-hand man. Matty Pete, who's been involved in bringing all these youngsters, he's gone. It's almost like Wigan have said, we need to clear the decks. And so
is it, or is it that the people that were working with him were so disgusted at what had happened, they felt we no longer want to work here?
I don't know. I think it's safe to say that the people who run the club are very sensitive about this, and they are adamant that there isn't a bigger story than Shaun decided the time was up, and Shaun wanted to move on. That is the official line. I'm not sure. I think there is more to it than that. I think your conversation with him about he's surprised he was leaving. I think the fact that very, very emotional towards the end, how much it meant to him.
We have spoken, Phil, many times about Shaun Wane, and he wants to, Rich just mentioned it, he would have taken the field with 16-year-old Wigan kids if he had to. And he wouldn't, you know what, he wouldn't have moaned.
No,
he wouldn't have moaned. He'd have turned up and go, we're going to beat St Helens, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And I just can't get it.
I just think it's a commercial issue that money is needed at Wigan, as it is at a lot of clubs. I don't think there's any secret in that. Their accounts show that Ian Lannigan is something of a benefactor at the moment. How you can win a competition and lose fans is an interesting debating point. As a management of a club, you have to put a stop to that. Now, if you feel that you can't do any more with the personnel that you bought because they've won something, you can't really do any more with the kids that are coming through because they're winning everything, where else do you change? So I presume they may have decided that it needed a philosophical change in the coaching ranks to bring back fans that apparently have fallen out of love a little bit with the way Wigan play.
We have no real idea how Shaun Edwards' Wigan are going to play, do we, in 2020?
No.
And he can't be...
Defensively, they'll be good.
It can't be a financial issue, because I'm sure he's not getting paid to Bob Oakley by the WRU, is he? And he's leaving a very well-respected role in a different sport to come back to rugby league. So it's the old adage of an old player coming back in the head coach as well. Billy Bremner at Leeds.
Yeah.
It's the obvious. I mean, Leeds tried, didn't they, for years after the Revy era. Every single player pretty much got to go in charge. You need the right person, regardless of whether they are a club legend or not. And we'll see if Wigan. We'll have to wait until 2 years' time to see if we're even wronger. I'm even wronger. That's no word.
It is now.
Well, it's all playing the book. How this decision works, and by that point, I would assume Shaun Wane will be back in rugby league, and who knows where, masterminding their downfall. You've got to think though, ahead of the grand final, he must have been gutted that Warrington beat Saints, because I'm sure he would have loved the fairy tale.
Yeah, he would have. I asked him that, and he went. He actually said, didn't he, on the record, I'm not. He said, I'm not bothered. It's whoever we're playing. And off the record, he actually said, I'm glad Saints lost. Whether we believe
I think
that or not.
that victory at St Helens meant a huge amount to him and to John Bateman. All the people that were leaving to send Shaun Wane off with a win at the home of their biggest rivals and preventing them from picking up the league leaders' shield that night. I think that was massive for Wigan.
Did we? Because they lost. Was it 3 or 4 on the spin when it announced he was leaving? And I was there that night at Hull KR, the first game after, and they were awful. And I remember saying to Paul Cook, a lot of these kids in this team, a lot of these players, all they know is Shaun Wane. And was that a bit of a hangover? And do we feel that they said after a few weeks, look, lads, we can't keep feeling sorry for. We've got to pull together here.
Yeah, I think that's where the senior guys would have come in and said, all we can control is to the end of this season with the guys still there. Let's try and do the best we can to send him out on as big a high as we can. And that is it. That's all you can do. I would be very interested to see if there is a distinct change in the way that Wigan play. Bearing in mind that their first 3 games are absolutely huge at the start of 2019. There's very little margin for error when you start with Saints, then you're into Leeds, and then you're into the World Club Challenge against the Roosters, which of course is Adrian Lamb's old club, may well even be coaching against his son. That's almost a flagship start. You'll know roughly what Wigan are about after those first 3 games.
Interesting, but overall, great year. They won the under-19s, they won the Women's Super League, of course, as well.
Hat-trick for Rachel Thompson in the grand final at the Manchester Regional Arena, in awful conditions, very windy. People who've watched the interviews afterwards will know that's the case. And Wigan, the only way's down for them next year, unless they win the Challenge Cup as well, and the League Leaders Shield and
World Cup Challenge,
Women's Challenge Cup. But they've got a better trophy next year as well. Be a shame if the Yorkshire Cup's got a better trophy than the Women's Challenge Cup.
You mentioned the women's game. I mean, a couple of other things that were highlights this year. One was the way in which the women's and the PDRL game took a leap on. And I'm not even sure that was planned. I think it was just a confluence of very committed people and very talented players who elevated it to a level that I don't think had been pre-anticipated. But hopefully we can kick on with that. I think the other people that deserve a huge amount of credit are York, for the work that they did in promoting social media. I think that they've given even some of the big boys at the top, maybe even the governing body, a real kick up the bottom as to what you can achieve with inventiveness and using, again, a really clever strategy that appeals to people outside of just the individual club. And those were 2 of the highlights, I think, the variant games. That were all not, if not more, pleasurable to watch than Super League at certain stages last year, and the fact that we've realised that social media is a tool that we need to use.
Some players that were tools at using social media. So
there is that as well. Very well done.
The Women's Challenge Cup final was a great highlight.
Richard sold his soul. I had millions of people. A, where did he buy that jacket? And B, what's he doing on the BBC website?
Greenwood's.
And look what happened to them.
Yeah, look at one of the great highlights of that day was Phil's row in the reception at the Halliwell Jones Stadium. It was hilarious.
As if.
But we saw, if you treat something with respect and professionalism, and you, more importantly, have a bloody good game to show people, then people will pay attention. And I don't want this to turn into a blowing our own trumpets thing, because it's not the most important thing about that day. But without us being there, without us, you actually getting off your backside and sorting things out, and the people, at Proper Sport who helped us do that, obviously with the technical side, would we have been the next day when people are watching the Challenge Cup semi-finals have seen those tries?
Yeah.
And there's a stark reality there. The main thing coming out of that day is what a great final it was between Leeds and Castleford. Fairy tale ending, because everyone loves Leeds. That they're...
It's just the way it happens.
Is talisman a word? Because I know, we're not allowed to say...
Is Lois Forsell the most important rugby league player in this country? Yes, that's an interesting comment, that, I think.
I think Jodie Cunningham as well. I think ambassadors who are promoting the women's game.
I mean in terms of actual importance to a team.
Sadly,
is she the most important player?
She's recovering from an ACL.
And that's what I mean.
Not going to play till September.
That's what I mean. Is she the most important
We'll see. We'll see.
Do we need to build on that?
Yeah.
Because they didn't build on it, did
No.
they? They didn't. The powers that be.
The governing bodies
this is an issue we'll have with them, and we'll keep fighting about it with them. But
the governing body spent too much time faffing around showing things on the Our League app that aren't relevant to people.
yeah,
And they need to show things that are relevant to people.
Yeah.
Made this argument on the show before. I understand, and Johnny come lately to Women's Rugby League. I've only seen matches this year. I've never seen a game before live. But the most important thing that's happened to the sport in the last couple of years, and this is not to denigrate any of the hard work anyone's put in the history of the sport, is the fact that the big clubs have bought into it. More likely the foundations have bought into it and given their names to these teams. So when you see Wigan versus Leeds or Castleford versus St Helens and whatever, these are recognisable teams that people who support the men's side can go along, and they've got a team to support already built. And again, I know there's been lots of hard work done in the past, and I don't want to take anything away from that, but it's very important that people, and especially the public at large, when you go on the BBC website and you say, it's Leeds versus Castleford, people have heard of those teams. And they might think, well, this should be good then, and might watch it. If you put on two villages, it doesn't quite have the same impact. And again, it's not to take anything away from the amateur game. People think I've got this down on grassroots rugby. I haven't. But we have to promote things that actually will sell to a wider audience. And in lieu of the fact that we can't sort out the international game, because we can't do everything, we're not magic, this is something we can actually, if we work at it professionally, and we only have to go back to after the final, when we were looking at planning coverage of the Women's Super League. I can't say the sport were as helpful as they possibly could and should have been in actively promoting it. We weren't allowed to move kick-off time. And I know we're just a broadcast, it doesn't matter. But if we want to move a kick-off time so it's not going up against actual men's games. I mean, there was a ridiculous situation, wasn't there, where Castleford women played a game at the same time as the men in a completely different venue and didn't play a triple header. You had a PDRL game in the morning, didn't you?
Yeah.
That men's game in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was Leeds
and a women's game in the evening. And instead of all having the games all at one stadium, which is the double headers, triple headers, this needs to be something that happens more often going forward. As much as the brand names are recognisable, if Leeds are playing Wigan at some park somewhere, it doesn't have the same cachet as playing it at Headingley. And I understand there's financial or whatever, stewards, whatever, but still. Why the sport allowed Castleford Tigers to drop the ball on that, and they did.
Yeah.
Because you've got to almost spoon-feed people. If you're asking people to go to a game separately at a different venue or whatever, it takes a bit of effort. And we see people don't want to have the effort to go to a semi-final. If you go to it's Leeds versus Widnes. Well, it's not Leeds versus Widnes anymore. Leeds versus Wigan at Headingley on a Friday night. It's going to be on telly. But if you're coming at 5 o'clock, we've got the women on.
Yeah.
I think we've already seen a slight change in that, and that we've lauded that obviously the Dragons are going to play in Barcelona against Wigan. Well, the Castleford women are going over to play a double header with the men against their Dragon counterparts in Perpignan. That's a step forward. We need to see more of that. I think the semi-finals being a double header was another success this year that, again, came out of nowhere because we don't plan things in advance. Don't even know what the Great Britain tourists are doing next year. So all of a sudden, a few weeks before, Bolton's going to host a double header, 30-odd thousand turn up, great atmosphere, felt more like the Challenge Cup than even going to Wembley did. There were more neutral shirts there, 2 decent games, 1 great upset to start it off. I just think again that we've tried something and by accident it's worked. Where was the announcement that next year we're having a double-header semi-final? Where it's going to be? You can buy your tickets now. Whatever. That's the thing that we need to do more efficiently because it worked. If you were at Bolton, it worked.
I'm just not sure people at the top end of the sport realise what they've got and what they can do with it. Because we've seen in the last few years, and you go back to the Paralympics in 2012, we were talking PDRL, and that was the watershed moment, wasn't it, for a disabled sport in this country? Because we all saw it on telly, we all saw the coverage it was given, proper coverage. And we've seen the rise of women's sport in the last few years. You know, there's a women's football show on the BBC every week. Gets a better slot than the Super League show, but there you go. Despite the attendance figures. The netball coverage, and however that's funded doesn't matter, it's got coverage. The women's hockey, when the international teams play. What are we doing? What is our plan? We don't have a plan. I know the main focus financially of our sport is the men's game. That brings in all the money. I understand that. But these other products we have, hate to talk in those terms, but that's what they are, can be keys for the sport in the future. And we'll probably just waste them all on petty squabbles and everyone will go off and play rugby.
Women's interesting because if they're carrying the names now of predominantly Super League clubs, will that come under Super League? Will part of the brief of Robert Elston be to promote the women's arm as alongside the men's? Or does the RFL, because it has such a lack of funding at the moment, and all of the arguments this year have been about the money coming in and how it gets distributed. There are very few income streams now for the RFL. Do they need to really set aside time, effort, vision and the limited resource they've got to promote the women's game and the PDRL, because that is still going to come under them? In which case, and we shouldn't keep comparing ourselves to the NRL because it is chalk and cheese. They've announced all their women's fixtures. They're out there this week. All the representative fixtures are out there. All of the extra games that the women are going to play, Indigenous trials and all that kind of thing. People can already get excited about the women's domestic game in Australia. We don't. We've had a couple of nice announcements. Obviously, Wakefield have been promoted. Huddersfield and Halifax are bringing in women's teams. That's great, but we still don't really know where the game's moving.
Yeah. You mentioned York and their social media, and you go back to earlier in the season where there's a groundbreaking story in Rugby League in the sport that there's a female official working in Super League, and we didn't tell anyone about it.
Reffing at Wembley of all places.
And then later in the season, there's a woman officiates a rugby union game and it gets big press coverage. And that's the difference. It's not about the sport, it's about the people involved working out what's actually newsworthy and what people will click on. And I'm not sure necessarily at times we know what we're doing with that. But we're happy to promote the same old.
Interesting. Well, hopefully the women's game gets the coverage it deserves. Certainly if we can do anything to help that, we will do. I think one of the most watched clips is in the world last year of Rugby League was me getting steamrolled in the PDRL, wasn't it, at Headingley?
Excellent. Can't be played enough. But I think you were surprised. I mean, in the idea of you getting involved, and Gary as well, was to raise the profile. But actually, one of the things that must have surprised you was how normal a dressing room it is. You must have gone in there with some reservations about what can you say, not say, do.
It was brutal. Yeah. Because, let's be fair, those lads, there's no political correctness when they're talking about each other. They're ripping into each other about what, and they don't care. And they were ripping into us as well. Don't let anyone... That was unbelievable. I think even Scoey was surprised at what a good dressing room it was. And for anyone that doubts it's proper sport, it's proper sport. It's proper rugby league. It is. Them tackles hurt.
Absolutely.
And I ain't gonna be. I went and played. I was a bit apprehensive. You're not quite sure what physicality do you use.
Yeah.
What physicality have they got? I think you go in saying these lads are going to knock your head off. That's what they're going to do. Yeah. You've almost got to meet fire with fire. So. Look, brilliant. Probably one of the best things I've ever done, and I mean that. And actually, the steamrolling thing, as embarrassing as it was amazing how many people watched it and commented on it. And that's what it's all about.
It says a lot about the commitment to the sport by the PDRL exponents of it. Again, what is the plan for PDRL? We know there has to be a little bit of tweaking of eligibility rules. We think that more clubs are getting involved not only in PDRL but learning difficulty rugby league as well.
Yeah.
We've seen Team Colostomy come on board, which is fantastic, another great initiative. We've seen all the work done by people like Luke Ambler, Stevie Ward for mental health, backed up by the likes of Rugby League Cares and State of Mind. We've seen Tony Adams come on board at the end of the year, and one of the things he wants to promote is not only how fantastic these athletes are, but the work that his charity's done to help the sport massively. Now, all of that, I think, again, has been a real plus this year, but some of it seems uncoordinated. What the next step must surely be to announce sooner rather than later what is happening with PDRL. Is there going to be regular fixtures? Are there enough teams now that we can have a fixture list that comes out far enough in advance that people can plan to see these games? Because they really must. They are brilliant. What's going to happen with Warrington went over and won a World Club Challenge? You know, it was almost
this year.
Self-appointed Warrington against self-appointed
Well,
Fine, absolutely fine.
fine.
But how do you then now make that you know, is that a reward for somebody now winning the league? Do they get the chance to host an Australian team or go out there? You know, do they need to start fundraising for that now? All of that, I think, is really exciting. I think we have got spectator fatigue and player fatigue and even sponsor fatigue, you'd say, with the men's game at the moment. But all of these other areas that can add to it are really part of our DNA now, and if we don't seriously take that on board, then we'll miss a trick.
Yeah. Is it a way for maybe lapsed fans to get back into the sport, Rich? Because I challenge anyone that went to watch those PDRL games not to enjoy them, and this is not pity the guy who's got one arm. I remember turning around at Headingley when a bomb went up, and I turned around and thought, thank God I am not underneath that. And the fullback, he's got one arm. He stands there, runs across, catches it, gets it in one hand, spiral passes out to winger, runs 80 yards and scores. And I think anyone in the ground thought, I've never even seen the first team do that. And it was like, the hits hurt, the tackles hurt, they get stuck in. The women's game, there's a bit of an honesty about it. There's none of the messing about. I think it's why we like rugby league. It's tough, it's rough, and it's
skillful.
People
always say, don't they? They always put this argument about the Championship and League One and Amateur Rugby League or whatever. It's real rugby league. So it's not like Super League where it's namby-pamby superstars, blah, blah, blah. And the argument's a load of crap. But this is rugby league. There's no difference between women's rugby league, men's rugby league, PDRL. I know there's obviously difference in terms of the rules in PDRL. But when you watch it...
But that's for the good of the game, isn't it? That's
when you watch
it,
it looks like rugby league. It's not some kind of pretend game. It's rugby league.
And you can put wheelchair into that as well.
Well, that's the difference. This is why... When the Paralympics come around, they talk about wheelchair rugby, and I saw it live at London. That's not rugby. They just bash into each other, and it's like basketball. Wheelchair rugby league is rugby league, just in chairs. We've got all these great things going on around the sport, but Phil talks about missing the boat or whatever and missed opportunities. That's just a concern to me. We'll end up with all these things being bogged down in petty squabbles that we need to... we've got, in terms of PDRL... one of the greatest people we could have as an ambassador in Adam Hills, who's got a weekly programme on the telly, talks at the game all the time. What are we doing? What are we doing? We've actually got these opportunities that are thrown at us. And like that bomb, the fellow with one arm's caught it, but we've got an octopus, can't catch it. What was it? The Warrington guy who scored the try and length of the field at Henley? I can't remember his name now. The one who comes up from Dorset or Devon.
What an astonishing story.
Just skillful rugby league. It's rugby league. And if people are sick of watching Super League or the Championship or League One, there are different offshoots of rugby league now you can watch and rediscover your love for the game, and maybe you'll go back to, we talk about the 1895 Cup, or we haven't talked about it yet, and we may not talk about it. Why isn't the Women's Cup final at Wembley as a double header? Oh, because it might not sell any tickets. Well, who cares? That's the showcase we've got to give.
It's the same with the grand final, that we have to move that to Old Trafford.
Yeah.
But, to have it on the morning of in the same city in a half-empty stadium, the players deserve more than that.
Or the worst case scenario, you make it a double header with a grand final to get into Super League. Maybe that might be
or
more fitting.
Or even you have it as a standalone event on the Friday night in the build-up to the grand final. So you're having grand final but some more thought needs to go into how we promote these positives.
Yeah, not positive for Widnes though. They've been relegated. Going back to on the field at the top table. It feels like it's been coming for a couple of years, Rich, doesn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately for them, they weren't very good. and they weren't very good in the Super 8s and they got relegated. I don't think there's much you can say about Widnes, and I think I used the word rubbish to describe it at one point, and it's unfortunate, but in a professional sporting league system, like you said before, not everyone gets a trophy. There are winners and losers, and unfortunately,
it's not school sports day, is it? It's not school sports day.
They've seemed an accident waiting to happen for about 3 years, and I think as important as the chance to regenerate in the Championship, I think their new pitch is big. I do think that's been holding them back a little bit. The teams that play on there clearly don't like it. They rest their senior, older, sometimes better players. I think Widnes have had difficulties attracting the calibre of player that they might want because of the venue that they play at. I'm not saying they suddenly are flush with money and will go out and sign Ben Barber again. They have to rebuild from the bottom up, but I just think them getting relegated, them ripping up their pitch, they almost seem synonymous to me.
And James Rule leaving, that feels like the right time. Well, Widnes fans will probably tell you it's 2 years too late, but it feels like the right time. It feels almost like a bit of a clean slate for them now, and Kieran Purtill will come in and hopefully regenerate the club.
Yeah, with Dr. Marwan Kukash's money. What? No, who said that?
when senior
it's his birthday today when we're recording this. Happy birthday, Marwan.
She'll be enjoying in his hotel.
We'll raise a minstrelsy.
When senior management are seen by spectators as the problem, there's nothing much you can do.
No.
Until they go.
It was never going to end any other way, was it? And I think the sooner it ended, the better. Replacing them, well, I think we all thought it would be Toronto, but probably one of the most bizarre games I've seen this year. London win by 4 points to 2. Not a trying sight, Phil.
I think the word used by everybody who watched it was compelling. I think if you were a Toronto fan, excruciating. I still think it's unexpected. We've had the fixture list out. London are in Super League. I'm still coming to terms with that because I think you're right. The expectation was that if anybody was going to be promoted, then it was going to be Toronto. That Toulouse were probably the second most likely. But London, through almost the will of their coaching staff and belief of their players.
How big an achievement is that, do you think?
I think we've underestimated how big it will be, and my worry is that if they do get relegated back down straight away, and obviously they will start as favourites to do that because they're the lowest ranked team coming up and they haven't recruited yet to any degree. So I hope that the achievement of coming up isn't lost if they go straight back down again. But it's massive because I think everybody looked at the runners and riders at the start of 2018 in the Championship. Very few would have put London in with probably even making the 4.
I think you'll find some people on this show did.
I think some had them far too low down the division.
But
I think when you looked at Lee and how they'd had their parachute payment, I think we all thought they were going to be in the 4. I think you looked at Featherstone and they were almost perennials in the 4. You looked at Halifax, who've always overachieved to get in the 4. You then add in the Toronto and Toulouse. And I don't think too many people thought, particularly with Andrew Henderson leaving, that London were going to be up there challenging. That it was going to be a year of maybe stabilising the club, and the freshness that Danny Ward brought. I mean, we don't know what he does on a day-to-day basis behind the scenes and how he gets that extra out of the group of players whose names you see on a team sheet and think, they'll struggle today, and they clearly don't because he's invested in them exactly what he wants out of them. I think he was a breath of fresh air in everything he said last year as well. I think he'll be a welcome addition to Super League. He's not your stereotypical coach. He's got a lovely turn of phrase. He's a bit off the wall. He's not frightened to say it as it is. I'd like to think they would stay around for longer than a season because I think having a team in the capital at the top table really enhances the competition. But I fear that maybe the 29 solid weeks of Super League starting in early February, it's a hell of a grind. Might catch them out, but it's a massive achievement that should not be underestimated.
Hell of an achievement because they had a really tough run in as well. I think they had to go to Fev, didn't they, and win. I think they beat Halifax at home in the final couple of weeks before they even got into the eights, and then obviously they went and they started off with that win at Widnes, and what an achievement.
Oh, superb. But that game against Widnes was superb, wasn't it? Superb entertainment in terms of London performance, and now we're all talking about London as a city because the Scholars are partially owned.
What do we make of this? Toronto owning part of the London Scholars. This is something we heard quite a while ago was going to be happening.
It
may even have been in April's 4020 magazine. Not that we're claiming an exclusive, but I think it's partly establishing a base over here. It's linking two cities of great commercial significance to each other. I think it's if Toronto do get to Super League, then it gives them a base in the capital to play some of their games, to get more corporate support, more interest for Canadian expats. That a lot of them live in London. I think it gives them voting rights. At the moment, not necessarily a direct voting right, but it gives them a say in the voting rights, as we've seen with this ridiculous farrago about who can and can't enter the Challenge Cup, that Toronto and Toulouse aren't members of the RFL. Well, if they have a vested interest in the scholars, then presumably their point of view can be voiced at council. So I think there's a lot of reasons to why they would do it. But I think they're very keen to build a base in the capital and to almost have as a second. They've got Manchester where they'll train. I think they've got London where they might play next year. So I wouldn't be surprised if 2 or 3 of their games are always in the capital. And in the same way that the NFL have got a footprint in a different area, I think Toronto will do that. It's also a point that maybe will be elaborated on as the relationship seems to work. But I think if they do have players that they want to trial, maybe even some, heaven help it, Canadian players, they now have somewhere they can play them. Because at the moment they are a single team entity. Quinn Nguati, who was their only teenage Canadian, who's gone back to being a pilot, because he was too young to be given an extended run and too inexperienced in a team that was challenging for promotion. You could imagine him going back to the Scholars, spent a little bit of time there and learning his trade. So I think it works on a number of levels and can only be good for the sport.
Interesting. Brian McDermott, the new coach, Rich, got to be a good appointment, hasn't it?
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? Successful coach at Leeds, and obviously things came to a head there earlier this year, having just won the grand final the year before. But he's got experience in the Championship. He's got experience of dealing with players perhaps with big egos. Some of them perhaps may need to be, taken down a peg or two, I don't know. But he's got a team who failed in their objectives last year. I know they'll say, got a 5-year plan or whatever, but they were the big favourites to beat London on home soil with all the advantages that have, and they didn't do that. So it'd be interesting to see, initially, how they play, because obviously we know Toronto under their previous coach, he's got a certain style, Brian McDermott a different one. It'll be fascinating to see how the Canadian media take to Brian McDermott, because he's completely different to Paul Rowley in that sense as well. But I think what you've got with the fans there is, or any fans who are thinking, should I follow this Toronto side? They've got a winner, a proven winner. In the same way we talk about Shaun Wane, he won't be away from the sport for long. Brian McDermott's back at a new challenge. I'm sure he'll relish that, won't he? Because he was at Leeds for so long, they did everything. There's nothing much more he could do there. A brand new challenge for Brian. I mean, you know better than I do, Phil, but he must be.
This really excites him. And I think it's going back to his days at London, but with the resource that he would have liked.
With the backing,
I think he loves the idea of leaving a footprint and a legacy. That's one of the reasons why he wanted to coach the American team in the World Cup, because he deliberately wanted to pick players of domestic experience, not so that they would win every game, but so they could go back and implant in their teams perhaps a more professional approach to the way they played and saw the game. What he'll bring them is the ability to win the matches they need to win, because he has that in his armoury. I suspect that had he been in charge of that grand final, he would have come up with a game plan that would have beaten London, because his track record says that when he gets to the matches that matter, he'll even change the way a team has played throughout the season. But invariably, particularly in grand finals, certainly in a Challenge Cup final against Castleford, what needed to be done was done to achieve the aim, and that's the bit that's missing for me for Toronto. I would make them favourites. I get that wherever there is a playoff involved and it's not first past the post, you have the injuries to the key men at the wrong times, it may unsettle you. But if there was a leading candidate for promotion for next year, for me it would be the Wolfpack. And I think that raises some really interesting questions about where Super League goes in the next 3 or 4 years. If London were to stay up, if Toronto were to get promoted, you're already changing the face of the sport. Decisions need to be made now as to what implications that would have.
He's got a natural leader there in John Wilkin as well, hasn't he?
Yeah,
That's
good
important.
player. Really good
Very
player. Yeah.
important.
As I think you said on Monday's show, Phil, I'm sure plenty of Super League clubs would have wanted him and his experience in their side next season. And I don't want to compare him to Kevin Sinfield at Leeds. Obviously, it's a different situation, but he's got that kind of leadership, hasn't he, that he will need in this situation to win those big games. And he's won plenty as a player as well as John Wilkins. So it will be fascinating to see how Toronto do. Again, under the scrutiny of everyone who doesn't want them in the sport or whatever. And maybe, who knows, in a couple of years they'll be playing almost derby games against New York.
I think Richard Whiting's appointment's this week quite important
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, I
I
agree
think the
with
one
that.
thing that they've never had is that link between the players and the management. It's almost like we'll gather together a group of players, we'll do everything we can to mould them, we're all in this travelling thing together, but there's still a relatively disparate bunch that at some point need to be a unit, and to have that link of a guy who's played with them and is now acting as their welfare and liaison with the management, I think that's a really important sign-in for them as well.
Good stuff. Who do we expect to be challenging the Wolfpack then? Where are we? We're going with the top 5, do we think, Rich?
I like Toulouse. Every time
Yeah.
I see them, I like watching them.
Yeah.
And they've signed well, haven't they, over the off-season. You've got to look again at Halifax, because whatever happens there, Coach Richard Marshall seems to know what to do to get them up into that challenging position. Featherstone, as we've spoken about, will be interesting. New coach. Lee, similarly, new coach, whole new squad. Take them time for them to gel. We've got the Bradford Bulls back in the Championship.
Do the Bulls make the 5?
I think it's tricky, isn't it? I think it's
I
very
think they
tricky
will.
because
I think they will.
there's so many teams who are going to be fighting for those places, and that's the great thing about having 5 rather than 4, isn't it? It extends that battle for a place in the playoffs. They've got the right coach, haven't they? That's the key.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's
I think
spoken about
they
with
were
Toronto.
they were there. Everyone wanted them to fail,
Yeah.
apart from Bradford, obviously, and they've done that now. And I think almost there's that. Well, they're in the Championship under their own steam. They got relegated. They've now won promotion. They're there. Let's see how they can build. And I think that's the exciting thing.
I think build is the key word. And I'm not sure that within the Bradford plan at the moment is to be in Super League next year. It is in Toronto's plan, I think. But I think if Bradford can not only establish themselves as a Championship club, but maybe 5th is attainable, maybe shake up the playoffs a little bit, because they'll be the wild card with nothing to lose. That's a season of success. Maybe, getting 50% more people through the gates, because the calibre of opposition perhaps is more exciting, more away fans will come. That belief and faith that lapsed fans have had, they start to come back. It's a building year, but I think it's one that they can be really positive about. And fifth is certainly attainable.
Just a shame for the Bulls that Bradford City are starting to pick up some form now and got rid of their head honchos.
You're doing again?
I think they want to.
They're still in trouble, mate. Don't worry about that.
But we've got to give Bradford credit off the field, as we know, because they blew open the world of broadcasting this year with their partnership with Proper Sport and sticking their games online and having falling out with clubs in Cumbria and whatever. If they hadn't have done that, who knows what would have happened over the year with the streaming on the Our League app towards the end of the year of the games in League One and whatever. It was a real, quote, game changer from the Bulls, and they can't do it next year now because they're in the Championship. We'll see what happens, but
we'll see. Watch this space.
League One's an interesting one.
Go on then.
The division that they've come up from, we're now going to have a National Conference South, which Hemel have dropped into. I think there is a real question mark over League One, and with all the changes that have been at the top, I think there are people that are looking at the amount of money that is given to clubs in the lower reaches and said, if there is a shortage of cash, that's where we need to perhaps draw some of it back from. Whether that's a debate that needs to be opened out a little bit wider as to what do we actually mean as a sport by development, and how much money we're going to put into it, and what does our national footprint genuinely look like. They're debates that should be being had. I just really worry that division is going to be the one that's squeezed if more commercial income doesn't come into the sport. Speaking to Leon Price last week about the advent of the 1895 Cup and saying, for a club like Workington, where there's history and tradition of winning the Challenge Cup, isn't it great that you've got the opportunity to potentially go back to Wembley? And could you be one of these Johnson Paint clubs that will take 10 times your average gate if you get to a big fan? He said it's good that opportunity is there, but our sole focus and priority has to be getting out of League One, because if by 2021, when the television deal currently comes to an end, there is little or no money for a club like Workington, we have to be in the Championship. We have to be as far up the Championship as we can, so that if there is a feeding chain, if we remain where we are, existence is almost impossible. So I think, again, that's, for every stride Super League takes one way, there is a cost to be paid at the lower end the other way, and that's something to be wary of in 2019.
Okay, just to round things up then, Warrington, so nearly it was their year. Steve Price came in, did a great job, got them to the cup final, got them to the grand final. It wasn't to be. They've recruited really well for next year. You can't say dark horses. Is it finally?
It might be.
2019.
Are they going to stop selling those T-shirts?
The year of the Wolf.
They'd hate that, wouldn't they? Could be a double wolf celebration, couldn't it?
Should have said wolves or wolf. Whatever.
Wolfers. Could be a double celebration. It could be their year. I think it's like last year when Castleford took advantage of teams in transition, and that was Wigan and Warrington on that year, and got to the grand final and should have won the grand final and came up against a league side who just knew what they were doing and didn't freeze. And as I said before about Wakefield, perhaps they've had opportunities to make the four and didn't take them. Perhaps next year's Warrington's opportunity. Wigan are in a state of flux. Leeds have got a new coach, new players, and they will challenge, but we don't know exactly how they will go. Saints have got to throw off the baggage of this year. Warrington, although they lost in 2 finals, I'm not necessarily sure at any point in those games I can remember where I thought they were going to go on and win. And this year could be, or next year, 2019, could be the year where all the stars align for the Warrington Wolves. So mark this down, and when they finish in 8th or whatever. I've got a feeling for Warrington. I've got a feeling the Catalans are going to be the dark horses, if you will. What's it? Dark Cheval. Cheval Noir of Super League next
Very
year. Good job I did film studies.
Sure, you've seen that on a menu.
I must have done. Not in Wakefield. I think, Warrington Castleford grand final, then give Robert Elston something to worry about in terms of signing out Old Trafford.
I think there is only one potential cloud on Warrington's horizon. That is circling news that Steve Price may be wanted back in the NRL. That's something they probably need to put to bed. I thought he also, as we praised Justin Holbrook at the beginning of the programme, I thought he was fantastic for the sport last year. And yes, there are issues about the balance is now switching more to Australian coaches, and we mentioned that on the programme this week. And I still think that we're right to question whether there should be any below Super League. But there is nothing wrong with the calibre of coach. I thought Steve Price was a gentleman. Thought he handled himself impeccably. He was brilliant with the media. He clearly had a rapport with the bulk of his players.
Yeah,
I was very impressed with the way at the start of last season, when things weren't going their way and he was trying to institute a different defensive system, that he was absolutely dead set that what he was doing was right.
Yeah,
stuck by it, and he was proved correct. Yeah. So I think Warrington can only build on the experience of losing 2 finals. They need to use that. Blake Austin gives them a different dimension, one that they didn't have last year. I still fancy Saints, but what I hope for Warrington's point of view is that the crowds come back in bigger numbers, because I think they are playing attractive rugby. They are on the verge of being a very successful team, but there were another of the clubs that didn't see that bounce in terms of the number of people coming through the gate.
I'd like to see our sports be stronger in terms of going back to the Denny Solomona situation, which I know seems like a long, long time ago now. We know that there's going to be
still playing?
No idea. I know there's going to be a lot of investment in Rugby Union coming up because they've signed this deal on this whatever, and people have got they're very excited. Oh, look at Rugby Union stealing a march on Rugby League or whatever. Forgetting that we're 2 completely different sports or whatever. I know there's similarities. All that's going to happen in Rugby Union, because this is easy to predict. You can't predict what's going to happen in terms of on the field, but off the field is easy. 1995, when everything changed and News Corporation stuck £1 billion on the table and everyone grabbed their money. What did they do with that money? Did they spend it on new facilities for spectators? No. Did they waste it on average players? Probably. All that will happen in Rugby Union is they'll waste that money and they'll spend it on whoever. And they might come and try and raid some people from Super League, but we just got to be strong, because people always come through, and they'll bankrupt themselves soon enough because they'll spend money and then realise there's no money left to spend. If any players do fancy the challenge, we just need to say, you might fancy the challenge, but those clubs have to pay up.
And we'll see you in 18 months when you come back.
And, enjoy your retirement.
Right, one wish then for 2019. What is it, Rich, Rugby League wise?
As ever, wait for win the Challenge Cup. Or, on a serious level,
You mean that wasn't serious?
No, Neil Fox is knighted. I should write a thing to the Honours Committee. That we take the opportunities that we have, don't squander them, and don't look back in 12 months' time and think, what if?
Phil?
That we look different. I think for the past 4 or 5 years, Super League has been almost too samey, and every year we felt that there's perhaps been a playing to a lower common denominator. I don't think this is a blank sheet of paper by any means, that Robert Elston Super League, but I just hope that we look and feel a bit different, that the focus is solely on the players, which is what everybody seems to say but rarely does.
Yeah.
That administrators' names quickly get forgotten. That we get back to the athleticism of the sport and the speed of the sport above everything else.
Okay.
And that hopefully the international game gets the prominence it deserves, which I doubt.
Yeah, hopefully this time next year we know who Great Britain have played.
Right, that's it. That's us done then. We're going to leave you to your Christmas celebrations. Hope they go well and you spend some quality time with your loved ones. We will be back every Monday from the new year onwards, talking all things rugby league. We sincerely do appreciate all your support, all your sweets as well. They're always more than welcome for the old table of tat. Thanks to Phil, thanks to Richard, thanks to Gary as well, who couldn't be with us today. Hopefully we get him back soon. He's on the sauce, as Rich said, and we will wish you all a happy Christmas, best wishes for the new year, and we'll be back hopefully with some more cracking rugby league coverage in 2019.